SI Now. It is Wednesday, May 3rd. I'm Maggie Gray here with Robin Lumber, co-hosting with me for another day. To all of you watching on Facebook, feel free to weigh in throughout the show. We have plenty to get to, but we start with what happened in Fenway Park on Monday night. As you well know, Baltimore Orioles center fielder Adam Jones was subjected to racial slurs. On Tuesday, he received a standing ovation from the Boston crowd. Sports Illustrated senior writer Tom Verducci was on hand, and he joins me now. Tom, you were in Fenway Park. Can you describe the scene in Boston on Tuesday night?
Well, it was a little bit surreal, beginning with a standing ovation for a visiting player at Fenway Park. And of course, that was for Adam Jones, who was the subject of racial taunts and slurs on Monday night. And I thought it was a classy gesture by the people of Boston. And it was a grassroots effort that may have begun with Mookie Betts, the outfielder for the Boston Red Sox, who sent out a tweet earlier in the day encouraging people to stand up and support Adam Jones, and also to make a statement that the kind of behavior that was exhibited by at least some fans on Monday night at Fenway Park just will not be tolerated.
Now, Tom, I know you spoke to Adam Jones yesterday. What was his reaction like a little bit after the initial incident?
Well, he was still upset, clearly. I mean, this is a guy who's been a major leaguer for 10 seasons. He's played more than 70 games at Fenway Park. So clearly whatever he heard on Monday night crossed the line from anything previously that he had heard at any other ballpark. He understood that the vast majority of baseball fans, and especially Fenway Park fans, don't represent themselves that way. But the fact is, it was ongoing in the course of the game. And there was also an incident where someone threw a bag of peanuts at him when he was returning to the dugout coming off the field. He made it clear that he was still upset the next day, and rightfully so.
Absolutely. And, fellow major leaguers have now weighed in. CC Sabathia said that African-American players in the game have spoken about this. The Yankees lefty told reporters on Tuesday, "We know there's 62 of us. We all know when you go to Boston, expect it. I've never been called the N-word anywhere but Boston." Tom, that's a stinging indictment. The Red Sox have apologized, but how big of a problem is this?
Yeah, it's clearly a problem, and unfortunately, it did take an incident like Monday night to really shine a light on this and make people more aware of it, because clearly, based on Sabathia's statement, that this has gone on for quite some time in Boston. And again, we're talking about a small percentage of fans, but this is a case where even one is too many. I like the way the Red Sox as a team and Major League Baseball in general responded to this. The Red Sox apologized directly to Adam Jones, and they also said that besides being subject to being ejected from the ballpark, that they could withhold the person's right to further attend games in Boston. And I asked Sam Kennedy, the president of the club, if in fact they could go even farther by fining people, which is what Adam Jones had suggested. And he said legally that's probably not something that the club could do. But he also encouraged fans to be involved as well. If you're in a section, you hear any kind of abusive language, there are methods. You can reach out to security people. You can text the club to make sure that that person is dealt with by security people. So I think it's incumbent upon the fans themselves as well as the club to make sure that there's a zero-tolerance policy.
Tom, we know baseball has had some difficulty reaching the African-American youth. Is this a setback for their cause to try and reach out to that demographic?
Well, definitely. I think any incident like this, whether, it happens in Boston or anywhere, it shines a bad light on Major League Baseball in general. So I think, yes, there is bad publicity related to this. But again, I think if you want to look on a bright side here, the response by MLB and the club, and actually the players, especially Mookie Betts and Adam Jones, at least I think shines something of a positive light here that, yes, there is an issue here, people, and we need to deal with it. But you mentioned the fact that baseball has gone up against declining numbers in terms of participation on the younger level, especially in the African-American community. Yeah, this definitely does not help that.
Tom, final one for you, and it's turning to another storyline between the two teams. It's Manny Machado, Dustin Pedroia, the Red Sox pitching staff, and a whole host of others. Now, we saw Chris Sale throw behind Machado on Tuesday. Machado unhappy about it. He went off to reporters.
Go ahead and hit me. Don't let the keep lingering around and, keep trying to hit people. I mean, and MLB should do something about hit pitchers out there with balls in their hands, throwing 100 miles per hour, trying to hit people. I got a bat too. I could go up there and crush somebody. if I wanted to. But you know what? I'll get suspended for the year, and the pitchers only get suspended for 2 games.
Clearly not holding back. Now, my first thought was, considering the microscope the game was under, why would Chris Sale escalate the situation that's already been boiling over?
Well, I think this goes back to the night before when Dylan Bundy, the Orioles pitcher, hit Mookie Betts with a pitch. And the way the Red Sox read that pitch was that was intentional. That was a 2-seam fastball directed right at the hip of Mookie Betts, the number 3 hitter for Boston, as retribution for the pitches that the Red Sox had thrown at Manny Machado. My question is, where does this thing end? Because now, based on Manny Machado's reaction, it seems like Orioles pitchers are going to go after Mookie Betts tonight. And again, where does it end? The Orioles now know that Manny Machado has been thrown at 5 times by Boston pitchers in the last week and a half. There were 3 pitches by Eduardo Rodriguez that actually missed Machado. There was the pitch from Matt Barnes that led to his suspension, and then last night the pitch from Chris Sale. So clearly Manny Machado had his fill of being thrown at. But again, it's hard for me to understand now where this thing will end. It certainly doesn't seem like there's closure yet.
Obviously, this has happened a lot, Tom, and I think it's unacceptable. I mean, at some point, doesn't baseball have to end this ugly culture where it's acceptable to essentially assault someone with a hard object at high speeds?
Yeah, baseball has done a pretty good job in the last 10 years or so in minimizing the number of on-field incidents in terms of players charging them out. They've done that with stricter penalties. But there's this old code in baseball that is still there. You know, it's sort of a macho code that doesn't make any logistical sense. Players like to think that those are the kind of things they can take care of on their own without any jurisdiction from MLB. But I do agree, it's very dangerous because, you know, you're talking about baseballs being thrown at upwards of 90 miles an hour, and when they do get towards the shoulder head area, it's extremely dangerous. So, you know, you just wish that nobody gets hurt, and you hope that pitchers all have the best of control when they're aiming at somebody's hip. But the fact is, balls do get away, and you'd hate to think that someone get hurt out of a macho code that still is in play in Major League Baseball.
We're going to have to leave the conversation there. We're out of time. Tom Verducci, appreciate your thoughts, Tom. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
On to a different type of baseball story. It's May, which means Tim Tebow is surviving his first 2 months of minor league baseball. But Tebow is far from the only celebrity to experience the grind of the minors. Here are a few famous faces who spent time riding the bus. Well, Tim Rohan of the MMQB has written more about Tim Tebow and his transition from football to baseball hopeful. Tim, how much is Tim Tebow's life as a minor leaguer different than, say, your average run-of-the-mill baseball prospect?
Yeah, I mean, he's not your normal minor league baseball player playing in Class A. He's got a personal assistant. He flies on private planes. He travels the country doing these public speeches that he gets paid for. He works for ESPN. He's a college football analyst. He's famous. He's Tim Tebow. And so it's kind of funny, this juxtaposition between him being this extremely famous person and doing all those different activities and then also going and playing baseball.
You mentioned some of it. I mean, the guy's dream was to be a football player, right? And then he became a football analyst, and now his dream is to be a baseball player. So the cynical out there would say, hey, this guy's just doing this to keep the attention. How genuine do you think his drive is to be an MLB player?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair question, right? I mean, on the surface, it's, you know, why would he even attempt to do this? You know, there's no possible way this is going to work out. And when you ask how genuine he is, I think you just have to look at how hard he's working. This guy he's taken batting practice 2, 3, 4 times a day. he's swinging so much that his hands are literally bleeding. Like, I looked at his hands, right in the palm of his hand, he has this quarter-size knot of just blood and skin that's just, he's working hard. And that comes from swinging so much. And so, you ask if he's genuine. I can't answer that question. You just kind of look at kind of what his actions are saying. And he's trying so hard. If it's just a show, then, that's insane.
Some of the reporting that you do in this story unearths a few things that I don't believe we knew about Tebow. And one thing is about his workout that he had with major league teams. Chad Smith, one of the pitchers who was throwing to him, basically, it almost seems like he was feeling for him a little bit. He's a fan of Tebow's, and he said, listen, look for some fastballs. He grooved a couple in for him, and Tebow was able to look better in front of scouts. How much did that actually help in Tebow getting signed to the Mets?
I talked to the Mets about it. I talked to Sandy Alderson about that, and he said the showcase didn't really sway him. He was kind of looking at Tebow as, we'll see how he pans as a prospect. But he, was very candid in the story about Tebow being, this draw, giving the Mets exposure. Whenever Tebow does something, people would mention the Mets name. But going back to Chad Smith, and like you're saying, in the story, we talk about how Chad is a guy of faith. When he was a baseball player, he would attend chapel, and he was a big Tim Tebow fan. So when he was pitching to him in the showcase, he was open with me saying that, Tebow was struggling a little bit, and he tried to give him a little pickup, grooving him some fastballs. And, I don't know how much it really affected it because the Mets, weren't really swayed by the showcase. But I thought that was fascinating that, Tim's celebrity played a little factor into, maybe getting him signed.
You mentioned that, and that's very interesting to me because I wouldn't expect them to be upfront. I'd expect them to try and be coy and say, no, we really believe in Tim Tebow as a prospect. If that's the case, why don't they just name their minor league affiliate the Tebows, right? Because doesn't that hurt his cause a little bit if the GM of the team he's trying to make is basically saying, yeah, this is a sideshow. Bring your kid to the ballpark on Tuesday.
Yeah. I don't. He did hint at that a little bit, but I think there is a little bit of sincerity in saying, let's just see what happens. Throw him out there. But as far as the sideshow thing, no one really came out and said that explicitly. It's just a lot of signs are pointing that way, and as I referred to with Alderson's comments.
Of course, Tebow himself. What do you think he's using as the benchmark to determine whether or not this baseball experiment, his baseball career, is a success?
He doesn't judge success and failure the same way as you or I do. I think that's an important kind of point to make because he made it very clear to me that, failure to him isn't making the major leagues. Like if he doesn't make the major leagues, that doesn't mean he failed. If he strikes out during a bat, that doesn't mean he failed. To him, failing would be not following his heart, not trying baseball. And, this sounds very fairy tale-ish and dreamer speak, but to him, that's how he thinks. He thinks that he had this dream to play baseball when he was a child. He talked to me at length about how when he was growing up, he remembered hitting in his backyard and having his dad pitch to him in this kind of fairy tale moment of.
It's a real Rockwell scene, right?
Yeah, that's exactly. That's what I was trying to was looking for. But so he's imagining that, and now he's famous enough. He's gotten to the point where he's famous enough that he can go try and live that out. And we all can't do that, so he's kind of taking advantage of that. And who can blame him? Really?
To be fair to the guy, I couldn't hit a home run off minor league pitching. Right?
Yeah, first at bat too. You can't make this stuff up, right? Like he gets up there, he hits a home run. Everyone's standing. The camera phone's out. It's a rainy night, and he hits it out, and.
Listen, no one can say that Tebow hasn't risen to the occasion when it's been presented to him. Of course, that was one thing that defined his very short NFL career was the comebacks and, of course, that playoff game against Pittsburgh. Now, Tim says that he has this is his quote, no earthly idea of what he's going to do next. And while I understand that, we know that he's rather calculated about his moves. He's got an inner circle. They are very much aware of the Tim Tebow brand, the optics.
Yep.
So what do you think Tebow and his agents have lined up for him down the road?
That's a good question. Well, we know for certain at the end of the season he's going to go back and work for ESPN, and he's kind of the face of ESPN's SEC Nation and SEC network that they have going on. So he's going to go back and do that. He's going to continue doing speeches, or traveling the country doing speeches. He's going to continue being involved with his charity. And then after that, who knows? I kind of spoke to him about it because before he chose baseball, they were throwing out ideas, politics, movies, more books, speaking tours, different things. And, politics is a real thing that Tebow could get involved with down the road. There's some people in his inner circle who think that that's where he ends up, that, his goal in life is to do, good by people, to help other people out. And, politics could be the way he does that.
How high are we aiming here, or how high is Tebow aiming for a political career?
I don't know if he hasn't, I asked him.
You thinking White House?
I asked him, I don't know about White House, but I asked him about politics, and, I don't think he's given it a whole lot of serious thought just yet. But, somewhere down the road, senator, governor, I don't know, the governor, Tim Tebow, like, if he ran for governor of Florida in 15 years, right? Is that out of the question?
It's always been his dream. That's what I'll say. That.
Well, yeah,
as a child with the father in the backyard.
He's got a lot of dreams. He's got a lot of dreams.
We can try to be, cynical about it, but you can't laugh at somebody who does have a lot of dreams. It's fantastic reporting, and I know spending a lot of time with him, you really feel like you got to understand his world. So fantastic job there, Tim. Before we let you go, I want to hit on one more thing in the NFL world, and that is a signing by the Denver Broncos, Jamal Charles. Running back who's oft injured, but the Broncos clearly needed some help. How big of an impact do you think Charles will have?
We'll see. I mean, if it all depends on how healthy he is, right? Like coming back from the knee injury, the uncertain situation at quarterback. Obviously, they have the great receivers. But what I'm kind of looking for, what I find interesting is, this kind of trend in the NFL about running backs over the age of 30, right? Adrian Peterson, moving on, going to the Saints. Marshawn Lynch coming back. And then now Charles moving on to the Broncos. I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how those three guys do, and judging it against that kind of theory that once running backs reach 30, they're no good anymore, and seeing if that's true anymore.
We'll see if that proverbial cliff is there that he's going to supposedly go off of after you reach the age of 30. Thankfully, that doesn't happen for regular people. Tim, Rohan, thank you so much. Again, great reporting on the Tim Tebow piece.
Thanks, mate.
When SI Kids first contacted me about Naya being a kid editor, I said, she can't even read.
Why is that in cover?
And even though I'm a Major League Baseball player, I didn't know it would be this hard to be her assistant. Hey, Naya, I brought you some coffee.
Anyone?
Naya, grab an M&M.
This.
They need more signatures, okay? Good job.
You signed you, Daddy.
Okay, let me sign. Thank God for Topps Bunt digital trading cards. You know how many you've had? 1,000 of them. I've counted every last one.
One?
Yes.
Only not one.
Yes.
No.
1,000. Up. 1,001. Now you have a 9 a.m. meeting with Toys R Us, and then a 10 o'clock with Nike Kids. Her days have just gotten a lot busier than they used to be.
That was a really fun day with Dexter and Nyla Fowler in the office. Jordan Schultz now making an appearance. Get comfortable, Jordan. We got a lot of basketball to talk about. Listen, this is your chair, basically. Yeah. We've anointed it your chair. Let's first talk about this fantastic game between the Celtics and the Wizards that we saw on Tuesday night. The comeback, the overtime win. What does it say about the Celtics? Is it a good thing that it seems like no deficit is really insurmountable, or is it a bad thing that they keep getting themselves into these holes and have to dig themselves out?
I would lean more toward the latter, Maggie. I think when you think about game one, they go down 16-0 to Washington. They obviously win that game double digits. Last night, they were down 7 in the fourth quarter. They win that game. For me, when you think about the playoffs, you can't keep putting yourselves in this position. You can't keep going down and then switching it back on. You go back to Chicago, they're down 2-0. At some point, it's going to hurt them. And I think when Washington goes home, if they don't split Boston, I think Washington's going to win the series because they played well enough to win each game. They haven't, but Washington is much better at home. Boston has struggled on the road. I like the Wizards in this series still.
Wow. Because
of what I've seen. They have an opportunity to win both those games. They don't get it done. But at home, they're going to even up the series and then really get it going.
That's interesting because to me, the Wizards look completely shot at the end of that game.
They were tired.
They need to get bench production, don't they, in order to turn this around?
Well, that's been the story with Washington all year. Yeah. They don't have a lot of depth. And when you don't have a lot of depth in the playoffs, it will show. They only play 7.5 guys. They need more. They need a third scorer. Okay, Beal did not play well last night. Oubre is very inconsistent. Morris has been really bad in the playoffs. They need somebody other than John Wall. If Wall's going to get you 40 and 13, somebody else has to get you 20, 25. And that didn't happen last night.
What about the other end, though? Like, defensively, they're switching the pick and rolls against Isaiah Thomas. And when Gortat or Morris is coming out there, they are food in those situations. Why aren't they blitzing those?
I don't know why. And this is something that, they've struggled with all year, Washington. They don't guard the pick and roll very well. And it shouldn't be that case because Wall's really good. But I think what they have struggled with, to your point, Robin, is who's really going to guard Thomas? Is it going to be Wall? Is it going to be Beal? Can we put Porter on him? No. So at some point, they have to find an identity of just one guy's going to guard him, and they have to ice the ball screens. They haven't done it, and I think that's really killed them.
And, of course, everybody knows Isaiah Thomas's story this playoffs. But really, beyond that, in just a basketball sense, his story has been incredible this season in the fourth quarter with Boston. He's almost already achieved a little bit of a cult hero status.
He has. He's been so special. I know we want to talk about, like the all-time game and how this portrays or lays out. I think it's one of the best games in Celtics history. I mean, Havlicek scored 54 and 73. Bird scored a triple-double in 86 when they beat the Rockets. To me, this is the second best performance in Boston playoff history.
Second, so you put it in front of Bird 1,
Thomas 2, and then Havlicek 54.
So Isaiah Thomas isn't better than Larry Bird already. You're comfortable with that.
It's the emotional part, too.
Yeah.
I mean, we can look back, Bill Russell's 40 rebounds.
Yeah.
There are things we can look at. Paul Pierce with a big, overcoming a 20-point-plus halftime deficit. But I think it's the emotional part of this that really fans connect with. So, Jordan, if you believe that somehow Washington is going to come back and win this series, how big of a collapse would this be for the Celtics, and what would that mean for them?
So I think they got false confidence in the Chicago series. Chicago was not a good team. They lost Rondo. That's how they won the series. Let's not, sugarcoat it. If Rondo doesn't go down, this series is totally different in the round one. He goes down. Now you're dealing with John Wall, who they've had no answer for. They have guarded Beal well. But for me, Washington has more explosive offense. If Thomas doesn't get you 53, you're not going to win that game. You can't keep relying on him to get you 35 because at some point he's going to have a bad game, and he can't keep guarding Wall for 35 minutes and expecting him to have this offensive output. That's just me.
Okay, so I guess is the question Thomas versus Wall? I think I know your answer to that would probably be John Wall.
I asked an NBA executive this week about who's the best point guard in the East. I said John Wall, and then I said Irving 2 and Thomas 3.
It's LeBron.
Yeah,
LeBron's the best point guard in the East. Come on.
You can say it's LeBron, but if we're going
Kyrie's the shooting guard.
Yeah, if we're going pure point guard, for me it's Wall, and I think he showed it last night. Thomas is a fantastic player, and I'm a Seattle guy. I love him, and he's the ultimate overachiever. But John Wall, what you saw last night was the complete package, the pick and roll, the speed in the open floor, the ability to defend. I think he needs to be on Thomas the whole game because he's, at some point, Beal's just going to get worn down. That's what's happened. So I think he needs to guard Thomas the whole game and then just have him show that he's the better player. They've both been great.
It's a little fait accompli, of course, because, the Raptors are good, the Wizards are good, the Celtics are good. But the other night, LeBron was like, hold my beer. I'm still here. I'm still the best. And I mentioned LeBron and Kyrie. My analogy for them is it's kind of like LeBron's the Batmobile, does everything.
Yeah.
And Kyrie's the Bat Cycle, can pop out and get into those small spaces and operate there.
So what's K-Love?
K-Love? Oh, man.
He's Robin?
Yeah, he's Robin. Unfortunately, I was named after the guy who has to ride on the outside of the motorcycle, right?
Does Batman not have like a boat or something? I mean, this is more your
Alfred.
territory than mine.
Who's Alfred?
Who said by the way,
Lue, yeah.
he said he had the most difficult job. Do you buy that?
Yeah. Tyronn Lue?
Yeah.
No, The only thing about Cleveland is, the only thing that really scares me is defensively. We talk about Boston turning on and off. Cleveland had the off switch all year on defense. They were terrible. And so now they're starting to defend, and you see LeBron saying, hey, I'm still here. But Ty Lue's done a great job. I don't think he has the toughest job. No.
He's got LeBron James. Would that mean
I
he's
think
got the
having LeBron,
easiest job?
yes.
Okay, let's not forget about the Western Conference. Anything that you saw from Utah in Game 1 that makes you think they have a chance against Golden State?
So they're not going to win the series, but I did see some things I liked, okay? Here's what I got. I've been thinking about how can I say Utah can win a game or two.
Put your monocle on last night.
Yeah, here's what it is. Okay, there's 2 points for me. One, they did what they did all year, which is guard the three-point line. Golden State wins this game by 8. They only shoot 24% from 3. Okay, they only hit 7 threes. Utah is really good defensively. We know that. We've talked about it throughout the entire year. They don't foul. They guard the line. Secondly, Hayward, Johnson, and Hill, your starting perimeter players, combined for 30 points. and they lose by 8. So that's a terrible output from those 3. Joe Johnson goes 4 for 10. Hayward never got in a rhythm, and George Hill was terrible. So they lose by 8, and yet they still have an opportunity to win despite their top guys not playing particularly well. I think that's encouraging if you're a Utah Jazz fan.
Is Rudy Gobert going to be able to recover from the
Steph put him through the
tap dance?
space-time continuum.
I love Gobert.
We all do, but that was a tough
Yeah,
mismatch.
yeah. I think you need to see the Stifle Tower tomorrow night, Game 2. Come back strong. Don't worry about getting dunked on. Everything's going to be okay.
Stifle Tower 2.0.
Yeah.
That was
Mr. Crab.
that's our.
He got put in a blender by Curry. He got put in a blender, but everybody gets put in a blender.
That's true. It's not the only victim that Steph Curry has had. Jordan Schultz, appreciate it. Robin,
Thanks.
great job. And thank you for watching this episode of SI Now. Of course, we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. But until then, keep it locked to SI.com for all the latest sports news. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. See you tomorrow. It was a blender.